All right. So I wanted just to spend some time tonight actually introducing Kathy to you and welcome everyone. Kathy Hoopmann has written over 20 books for children and adults, including picture books, novels, and nonfiction, with translations into almost as many languages. All up, she has around 50 of her books in different languages on her shelf. She has won and has been shortlisted for numerous literary awards, including the Children's Book Council of Australia Award, the ALCS Educational Award from the UK, the Living Now Award in the US, and 4 times has been awarded a Nautilus Award, which is also from the US, which is granted to books that change the world. You can read more about her books on her website at kathyhoopmann.com. And Kathy is best known for her writing on neurodiversity and her photo illustrated books. All Cats Are on the Autism Spectrum, All Dogs Have ADHD, All Birds Have Anxiety are bestsellers worldwide. And something that you may not know about Kathy, but you probably will know when she starts to speak with us, is Kathy was born and lived in Australia. So she is joining us from Australia today. So it is, Kathy, what, 9 a.m. your time?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. All right.
In the middle of summer.
In the summer, that's right. Absolutely. Although it feels a little like summer here today because it got up into the 60s. So we're really surprised by that. But anyway, Kathy, we're so happy to have you with us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I did want to start off tonight with our first question to you. Can you tell us about your background and how it led you to becoming an author?
I started out my adult life as a primary teacher, which I did for 20 years. And during that time, I dabbled with writing, I think like a lot of people do. But then it got to a stage where it was more important to me than the teaching. And I was also in a position where we moved countries. So when we lived in the Middle East for 13 years. So when I moved to Dubai, I had time to write a lot more than I had in the past. So then I became a full-time author at that stage.
Great.
Does that answer it?
Yeah, no,
I suppose
thank you.
if you're wanting to know about the neurodiversity side, I just started writing fantasy. Actually, that was my great dream when I was first out. I wanted to be the greatest, fantasy author out there, which was my passion. But then I had a family member diagnosed with Asperger's, and I got absolutely intrigued by the characteristics of Asperger's and how intricate and interesting people are on the spectrum. And so I started bringing those characters into my books. And this was back in 2000. So we're talking a long time ago, before people really, really understood it very much. So it was one of the first times that we were able to see an Asperger character in a novel for a child, which was very unique because at the time, all the information was pretty much for parents or professionals, and children didn't have a voice really in literature. So my first books in that foray, I've got them right next to me. The first one I wrote was called Blue Bottle Mystery, and it incorporated Ben, who has Asperger's, and then that was followed up with Of Mice and Aliens, and then Lisa and the Lace Maker, because I wanted to also show that girls could have Asperger's as well. So that's what brought me into that world, just a delight of the characteristics of people on the spectrum, and just to be able to show that there's so much more than the stereotypes that were around back 20 years ago.
No, thank you for that. No, absolutely. And certainly, as you said, in 2000, you know, we didn't see neurodiverse characters in books for children. So thank you for doing that. But what we've also noticed in some of the books that we have in our library, that many of those, your books include animals. And they seem to match so well with when you're talking about either all dogs have ADHD or all cats are on the autism spectrum or all birds have anxiety. Can you explain how you made the connection with animals?
It goes back to a talk that I listened to. I went to a conference by Professor Tony Attwood. Some of you may be aware of him because he's Australian, but he's very active in the States as well. And he had a throwaway line in a way. He said, all cats are dogs with Asperger's syndrome. And it really caught my imagination. I thought, that is so clever. And I kind of felt there was something in that statement. And I literally dabbled with it for about 5 years because at the time I had a relationship with Jessica Kingsley Publishers, who was publishing those books I just showed you. And I went to her and I said, I think I'd really like to explain Asperger's through a cat image. I said, do you think there's anything in that? And she came back. That was back when Jessica Kingsley Publishers was owned by Jessica Kingsley. So Jessica came back and said, yes, but we don't illustrate books. At that stage, they only had adult professional novels, really. It was a big leap for them to even do a fiction book that they published of mine. But they don't do illustrations. So if you want to do it, you'll have to illustrate it or get it illustrated for yourself. So that put a dampener on me. I didn't know how to do it. And I put it on the back burner, but I kept coming back to this idea and a need to explain Asperger's, as it was called back then, in a really simple way for the average person to be able to pick up a book and within about 10 minutes have a better understanding of what is going on with autism, with Asperger's. And it was actually my dad who came up with the idea. He says, why don't you use cat pictures? Because his next door neighbour kept sending him cat pictures. And I thought, well, you need a lot of them. So, cut a long story short, I looked into how I could get royalty-free images, and I came across the website shutterstock.com, which is where you buy the rights, but they're very, very cheap to buy. Back then, I could get like 700 images for like $200, and then you could use all those images in a book. So that's how kind of the background came. But the idea of cats, as soon as I started looking at cat images, they're just so amazingly gorgeous, but very, very apt as well. So it was just a synergy that worked with the cats book. So that's when I went back to Jessica and I showed her about how I could use cats. And this was the one at the time, to be able to explain the book. And they absolutely loved the idea. And that's where it went from there. But when it came to the dogs, that was a whole different kettle of fish because I knew a lot about autism, Asperger's. I live with it daily. And I, with a teaching background, I had a bit of understanding as well from that perspective. But people kept saying to me, well, if cats got Asperger's and dogs have got ADHD, then it's a no-brainer. And I knew nothing about ADHD. But it kept mulling over my mind, maybe that could be a sister book. So I went back to Jessica and I said, look, I don't know if I even want to write this book, All Dogs Have ADHD, but if you ever consider it, would you give me the first option to be allowed to write that book? And she came back and she said, oh, we have been thinking about it. And we've been talking to another author about them writing that book. But they went to that author and said, Kathy wants to write All Dogs Have ADHD. And that other lady said, let her do it. It's her book. Let her do it. So I was really, really privileged that she gave up that right, because that then gave me an ability to follow it through. So that was how the dogs one came about. And again, the animal just was perfect for that. And the bird one is another interesting story. So I was in Dubai when I wrote All Dogs Have ADHD, and I was working with a professional psychologist at the time to help me get the traits right. And he had a very strong accent. And he said to me, I have, excuse my accent, he says, I have many, many people come through that all have anxiety, all have anxiety. You must write all bears have anxiety. And I went, I don't think bears have anxiety. And he said, no, not bears, birds. And I realized he was saying all birds have anxiety. So that was a planted thought in my mind. And again, I didn't write that for many years later until anxiety impacted my circle of friends. And then I had some very close friends with extreme anxiety. And I didn't know what was going on with them. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know how to come along. I seemed like everything I said was wrong. I made a mess of some friendships because I just didn't understand anxiety. I don't have it myself, and it's hard to relate to some people who do. So I did a lot of research. I do what I do best. I love researching. So when I was researching, I thought, well, if I'm going to research it, I might as well put it into a book, or I'm not going to waste all this. And that's where All Birds Have Anxiety came about. So that's just 3 of the animals that I worked with. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, no, thank you. That was so insightful and so connected. We really appreciate it. Would you mind reading from All Cats?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So this is, that was the original.
Mm-hmm.
And when I wrote that, Asperger's was a thing. It was on the DSM-5. As you probably know now, it has been eliminated. When I wrote this, it was also pretty well known that, or accepted, not known, that boys had Asperger's and girls probably didn't, or not as much by far. But as time went on, people recognized that it's not a gendered trait. And this book was written with male pronouns. So there was definitely a time it needed serious updating. So that's when we did this one, All Cats on the Autism Spectrum, with gender neutral language and more updated information about what was going on in the autistic community as well, a bit more sensitive to how the autistic community self-identify so much with autism. And even the name itself was a really difficult thing for me to write. We had 3 options. All cats are autistic, all cats have autism, or all cats are on the autism spectrum. And all 3 of them created issues for some, and others absolutely loved them. And I knew that it didn't really matter which cover I chose. Some were going to love it and some would actually even be offended by it. So I chose the middle line, all cats are on the autism spectrum, recognizing that even that might harm, like some people could be hurt by that title because they wanted all cats are autistic, because autistic people are autistic. They're not on a spectrum, they are autistic, and I really appreciate that. So it was a very, very difficult decision to make this, but I'm happy with it, and I I'll read you a little bit from it. Angle it so you can see a little bit. And I'll just start from the beginning because it's quite cute. I'm sorry, angling myself so you can see it as well. The first signs of autism are usually picked up very young. Those on the spectrum look at the world in their own unique way. They like to be those they love, but might not want to be held. They can be extra adventurous and use up some of their 9 lives all too quickly. What I'd like to do, rather than just keep reading through, is explain a little bit as I go as well. So this book is written from third person. So what I'm doing is I'm explaining what it's like into the life of someone with autism. I have another book which I would like to read next to show you the comparison, where it's written from the point of view of someone with autism, explaining it outwards. So this is the me explaining, and the other one is them explaining. So I'll just keep reading. This is about the senses. Autistic people often have exceptionally good hearing, and loud sounds and sudden movements may scare them. Yet at times, they don't respond to their name or requests as if they can't hear at all. Perhaps some of you know that one. Their other senses can be heightened too, such as touch, I hate bath days, and smell. Are you wearing perfume? They are often fussy about what they eat and may want the same food presented in the same way day after day. So that's that explanation. I'd just like to share with you the book that I have right in front of me here. This one is not so well known as mine. It's called Inside Asperger's Looking Out. But I really love this book because it's from the point of view of someone with autism explaining it out. And the reason I wrote this one is because John Elder Robeson, he's a good US guy you might know of, an autistic man in the States, came to Australia to a writers' conference here. And I had the pleasure of meeting him and listening to him speak. And he explained autism from the point of view he has it. So he was able to explain it in a way that, even with all my knowledge, gave me a new insight. So I'm now going to read from this book on the senses area to show you the different way of viewing things. There are a few things, however, we have in common. Consider our senses. They can be hyper alert. Got that hyper. It's as though our senses input button is turned right up. Some foods, which others think are yummy and healthy, can taste yuck to us. We're not trying to be difficult. We'd like to eat what others eat, but sometimes it feels slimy or bad or just plain wrong. If we say that a sound annoys us, we really mean it. Even the scratching of pencil on paper or the buzz of a light can drill into our ears until we'll do anything to shut the noise out. But sounds that we control or make ourselves do not bother us at all. Go figure, huh? So you can see that they tell you the same thing, but it's from a different perspective. And I think both perspectives are really valid and interesting, I think, to give a bigger picture. I think it's about time I update that, maybe Inside Autism looking at. Maybe we'll talk to Jessica Kingsley Publishers again on that one.
Yeah. No, thank you, Kathy. No, that was wonderful. And I so love the comparison of the two. Thank you. Would like to ask you, when you're talking with the public, and what are often the reactions that you might get, or just maybe even sharing a few stories of some of the people that you've encountered that have read your books and have made connections with them.
I think that's one of the joys of being an author, is when your readers reach out with positives. It's not so much fun when they don't like your work. I'll share one of someone who didn't like my work. So when I was explaining how sensitive people can be about whether you are autistic or have autism, back when I wrote All Cats Have Autism, I have Asperger's syndrome, I had a teacher contact me and she said, I really like your book, but I'll never read it to my class because you call the child an Asperger child. But it's actually a child with Asperger's. And I find that, offensive, which is really weird because now it's completely the other way around. Now you can offend someone by saying you have Asperger's rather than you are autistic. But that's quite an extreme thing. They will black ban you because of nuances of language. And while I respect that, it's hard as an author to hear it. But the positive ones, I get way more of those. And there's a few cute ones I can share. One guy contacted me after reading about cats, and he said, I'm an autistic adult, and I had made the decision that I will not have children because I don't want to pass on this condition to my offspring. But he said, after reading your book, I realized that if I have kids, it's like having a kitten, and a kitten's a wonderful thing. And how exciting it would be to have a child on the spectrum when I realized that the traits that I can be passing on are really positive as well. So that was an amazing one to see. Another one, a lady, she was in her 60s, and she wrote me this most beautiful, beautiful email. And it was beautifully crafted. It started off, I saw your book, ordered that online. It came in the post, and I made myself a coffee and I sat out on my veranda, started opening it. And then I cried for an hour because she said, you have just explained my entire life to me. At the age of 60, I finally understand myself. And she said, you've changed everything. After reading that book, I bought up heaps of copies. I gave them to all my friends. I embraced my traits. I'm a new person because of your book. And that's, that was one of my favorite ever emails that I got. Another guy, he was in his probably late 30s when he contacted me. And he said he has owned every single one of my books. He started reading them when he was about 10. And he related first to Ben in Blue Bottle Mystery. He said it was like you were explaining me. He said, now I'm in my 30s. I've got a doctorate in music, some sort of musician in the UK. And he just wanted to tell me that I've journeyed his life with him through my books. So that's really beautiful as well. And then a really, really common one is a lot of parents have said they've used my books to explain the diagnosis to their child. So it's a very, very unthreatening way to be able to read the book together and go, this is a book about autism, and it's got cats. And often the kids, as they will look at the pictures, go, I do that, and I do that. Maybe, do I have autism? And then mum will go, yes, darling. And she goes, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So the diagnosis becomes completely non-threatening. And accepting and calm, and just goes from there. So yes, I have had some wonderful feedback, which I appreciate a lot.
No, and thank you, Kathy, because we, of course, at our library do have so many of your books, and I will tell you that a lot of families and teachers and school counselors, check them out in order to read with children, and it really is a very non-threatening and safe way for children to understand about autism or anxiety or ADHD, and we get the same feedback. Thank you. This was a wonderful book, and so, which is why it's hard for us to keep them on our shelves. So, but thank you. No, they're amazing. And actually, and you shared already that you actually have written novels. And how do you incorporate these neurodiverse characters into your novels, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, so the very first one, I'll quickly go back to that. With this one, I introduced the trait right at the beginning. I'll just read the very first page. Ben, this is the first chapter, of the book. Ben, stop that. Ben froze. Stop what? He was tilted back in his chair with the front legs off the floor. Slowly, he leaned forward and let the legs touch down. Across the room, Miss Browning-Lever still frowned. That was not why she yelled at him. He sat up straighter, stopped swinging his legs. No, wrong again. Miss Browning-Lever came towards him, angry, scowling. Why was she always so hard to understand? Why was he always in trouble? He hated school. So from that perspective, I just jumped straight in of a child who didn't know what was going on in school, didn't know what was going around them, didn't know what they're getting into trouble. It was just a classic situation which so many people on the spectrum deal with. So from that perspective, it was easy. I just jumped in with the traits and then went with it. And through that book, Ben is diagnosed. It's a very specific book for autism. It's not just using the character, but it's explaining how the diagnosis can come and how change can come when people around you understand the diagnosis and you understand yourself. So from that perspective, that was an easy one. Another one that I co-wrote this one, Elemental Island. I love this book. Again, it's interesting how some of my favorite books are not my bestsellers. And this is one of my favorite books. So this book I wrote with co-author with a lady called Judith Kiss. And she also has a child on the spectrum. So together we had a great understanding. And I was living in Dubai. She was living in Budapest in Hungary. Long distance friendship. And I was sitting on her couch in Budapest and we were going, what would the world be like if everyone was autistic, if that was the norm? And then you had someone who was not autistic born into that society. What would it be like? So we just had great fun imagining this world of autism. So we decided we write the book. We made an island called Elemental Island. We had it isolated from the mainland for 150 years. And everyone on that island pretty much, as it grew, are autistic until our main character, Astatine, is born and she's neurotypical and having to. Can you still hear me, Mary?
Yeah, we got you back. You're good. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was a really, really fun book to write. And the autism is never even mentioned in the book. There's no word for it because it's the norm. So you kind of have to read around it to be able to understand what it is. But that was a fun book to write as well. And then just one more of my ones. This is a recent one that's just been a couple of years ago. It was published in Australia, and the sequel is coming out. Well, we've just finished writing the sequel, so hopefully by the end of this year we'll have a sequel. And in this one, again, I co-authored with another lady whose child is on the spectrum, and again, a huge insight to that whole world. What we did is we made a club, the Secret Science Society Club, of 4 children. One has autism, one is autistic, one has ADHD, one has anxiety. Sound familiar to you? And one is neurotypical, and they're forced to work together. So what we did was very deliberately brought these characteristics into fiction, because so many children will relate to one or the other of those, and then showed how their strengths and weaknesses could be, their weakness was supported by the characteristics of the other person's trait, and then their strengths can shine through as well. So this has been a really fun book to write too. So that's kind of how we've done it. Different books have a different aspect of the traits that I wanted to bring out as I wrote them. Oh, and just one other thing, just while I think of it, the Blue Bottle Mystery has been made into a graphic novel, which is beautifully illustrated by Rachel Smith, who's really making a name for herself in animation as well. And then Lisa and the Lace Maker is also a graphic novel. And again, illustrated by Mike Medaglia, just amazing, amazing artists that I was lucky to be able to work with. So there's just a couple of others. And inside, when I say graphic novel, it's, like cartoons. Same story, just completely different formatting. So there you go.
Wow. No, oh my gosh, that is so great, because I know, a lot of our young, kind of young adult, adolescent, students would really love that graphic novel approach.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing
The
that.
inside.
They're beautiful.
They are, they're stunning. Just, they're gorgeous. And I can say that because I don't have to do any of the hard work.
Right. Oh my gosh. No, thank you. So I would like to open it up for some questions from our families that are with us tonight. So please go ahead and put those in the chat. We would love to hear from everyone. And I know you had, Kathy, just as we're waiting for some questions, I know you had talked about, initially with your books, just the beautiful pictures, of course, that you have in them. How do you think that these pictures really convey your story? It's amazing that, when I was listening to you read and I'm looking at the picture, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. How does that process look for you? Because I can imagine that must take a lot of time and looking at a lot of pictures. So what's that process like for you?
Yep. So as I said, I get them from shutterstock.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there's millions and millions of images there. It's enormous amount of time. Yeah, absolutely enormous amount of time. So I could look at hundreds of thousands of images to choose 70 that I would need.
Right. Okay.
And some of my days is just literally photo. Sometimes I know exactly what I need to portray. So I will go searching for a very specific image. Sometimes I'll see an image that is just so gorgeous that it's a goer. I have to work the text around
it. Okay.
Like this one, this first one. Yeah. that I already showed you, but it's just the most gorgeous photo. When I saw that one, I just
Oh, yes.
that
Yes.
is going in my book.
No,
And
absolutely. And so conveyed what you said on that page. So no, that was great.
And as I said before, when I decided I thought birds and anxiety would work together, I had no idea if I would be able to find bird images for that.
Mhm.
So when one of my first thing I did was look at lots of bird pictures, and then I realized, oh wow, they're good. I'll
Yeah. Oh, show us. Yeah.
even just the cover.
Yes. Oh, I know. That's the best cover. Yes. I love it.
And some of the images, let me see. To make things worse, we don't sleep.
Well, oh gosh, yes.
We lie there knowing we have to sleep. Then we worry we can't sleep, which stops us from sleeping.
Wow.
So yeah, the birds are, as soon as I started working, I just knew that this is going to work.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely.
A little harder when I got the dyspraxia book. So when I talked to Jessica Kingsley, there was no one animal that you could say was dyspraxic. Pretty much, if you had a dyspraxic animal, it's probably dead because it, would have been clumsy or wouldn't have been able to survive the survival of the fittest. So we jumped to all about dyspraxia, which gave me the opportunity then to choose any animal I wanted. And that was really fun.
Oh, that's great.
This one starts off, some people think dyspraxia is all about being clumsy, but there's much more to it. So I was able to just have fun with that one.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. Well, we have some questions coming in. So the first is a parent who's saying, I have an autistic son who is a big stimmer, and I'm tired of putting up with ableism. Do you think you'll write about stimmers? So,
a whole book just on stimming? No, not a whole book just on stimming. I think it comes as part of autism through it all. So no, probably not. But again, for that person who's writing that, stimming is part of the whole picture. So if you are able to maybe, give one of my books to the person who is commenting negatively on that, and being able to see it in such a bigger world and not zooming on one thing, because there's so many reasons for stimming, it'll bring a sympathy and not a sympathy, that's the wrong word, an understanding and empathy. Empathy's better. But probably not a whole book just on stimming.
No, understood. But I really appreciate that, you talk about that is just one part, right? Of it could be one part of a child. There's so many other parts to a child. So thank you. So we just have another comment from a family member who says, love what you're creating and sharing with the world. Thank you. And then actually another comment, and I so appreciate this. She said, thank you, Kathy, for these wonderful books. I'm an ADHD coach who has ADHD and with children who also have ADHD. I recommend your picture books to my clients, young and old. I was introduced to them by my mentor, and she gave me copies of the original edition. So she said, time to get updated ones. So thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments for Kathy? Here we go. So as a preschool special education teacher, I see many students that are on the spectrum. If the child has not been officially diagnosed, how do I talk to or work with parents, for example, on a child's play rigidity or stimming on wheels or opening and closing doors? Do I or the parent just acknowledge that as part of the child or try to change it? What are your thoughts?
If a child's not diagnosed, then you can't use the diagnosis because you're not skilled to diagnose.
Right.
However, you can always, whether you acknowledge a diagnosis or not, how you deal with it isn't going to change. Words not going to change your behaviors. As a teacher, this is one of the books I don't know if you're aware of. I wrote this a while ago, obviously when Asperger's was still a thing. So it's Essential Manual for Asperger's Syndrome, or ASD. It was just on the cusp when ASD became a thing in the classroom. And what I've done that is I've combined my knowledge of classroom, because like I said, I was a classroom teacher for 20 years. And I've gone through all the different areas of Asperger's or autism that you would find in the classroom. So it's, I'm just reading through my own contents page, but helping child with organisation, helping child with adapting to change, understanding the perspective of others and theories of mind, body language blindness, literal thinkers and speakers, forming friendships, meltdowns, emotions, all the sensory issues. And so every one of those chapters is designed for the teachers to be able to work with the child. It's giving the child's perspective. And it's really important to not just know a fact, but to see it from their point of view, which is often very different. It's how to talk to the other children in the class around these things, and how to work with a parent, and how to give assistance for home as well. So it's like so much work that's gone into that. And it might help the person who asked that question to be able to have a look through it and say, okay, I can't mention a particular trait, but this is how I can deal with it. And this is how I can help a parent deal with it as well.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. So we have another question. Any advice for helping a person with autism develop better table manners? She said, my 18-year-old is capable of using a fork, but has a habit of using his hands on things like salad.
18? No.
Yeah, not a little one. Yeah.
I think if there's 6, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it was Temple Grandin who sent them something like manners count. Manners really matter. And if a person can understand the effect that apparent bad manners, like if you're in public place and you're grabbing salad, it gives off a vibe that they might not mean. And perhaps just to explain what it's like from someone else's point of view, they're just not getting it. But other than that, yeah, at 18, I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, thank you. All right. Any other questions for Kathy? As we're maybe waiting for a few of those, Kathy, anything else you'd like to share with our families tonight?
Maybe just I've got another book that I'm working on.
Yeah.
It's on pathological demand avoidance. For those who aren't aware of it, it's under the autism umbrella. So first you have to be diagnosed with autism to have pathological demand avoidance. And that is a combination, and I'm on early stages of research here, so please forgive me if I get nuances wrong, but it's related to extreme anxiety of loss of control. So not only do you have all the different various autistic traits, but if the person feels they're out of control, then there will be a massive reaction. So it's pathologically avoiding demands. And demands is can be anything from pick up your shoes or don't eat your salad with your fingers to even I have to get out of bed in the morning to get to school. That's kind of a demand. And so there will be a reaction against it. And in some cases, it can be quite violent. It's like a terror of losing control. So a very small request, like a very reasonable small request, can be met with screaming, fighting, kicking, punching. It's quite extreme. So when Jessica Kingsley asked me to write on pathological demand avoidance, I thought, okay, I don't know much about it. I knew a little. So I reached out to my local autistic community and they said, yes, please, we need this book. We need it so badly because a lot of our kids are just so misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And you can understand if you've got a screaming, kicking child, how that impacts so many things, their family life and their home life. And yet with understanding and dealing with it, I've talked to so many people whose lives have been transformed through correct dealing with someone with PDA. So it's a joy to write it. It's going to take me the rest of this year to do it. There's a lot of research involved, but I'm looking forward to that one.
No, well, we are too. I did want to share with you another comment from one of our families who says, my cat-loving son was very recently diagnosed with what used to be called Asperger's. I found your book at our library and instantly knew he would adore it. He giggled the whole way through while smiling ear to ear and finally understood the concept we were trying to help him see. Thank you. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Well, Kathy, I think that is probably, unless someone else has any other questions, I think that is it from us. Any final words for our families?
Just thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me on, and it's lovely to be able to know that my books are used, because it's so pointless writing a book that just sits on a shelf. So it's right. It makes me feel warm and cozy to know that all that work that I put into it is benefiting people and changing lives.
Yes, absolutely. And that is absolutely true. Kathy, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Please do reach out to us at the Parent Resource Center if you would like to check out any of Kathy's books or spend any time with us talking about your child and any other resources that you may need. But we look forward to, and Kathy, we're looking forward to the next book and the next book after that. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight and sharing your wonderful stories. And we so appreciate what you do. So
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.